We're here at the Besser Museum with Mary Beth-Stutzman. Mary Beth is going to give us a little education on the history of Alpina's lumbering.
That's right. A lot of us that grew up here, we kind of know that lumbering is a big part of our history, but we don't know a lot. And we may remember little bits and pieces that we learned growing up, but it's really not something that's in the forefront of our mind. So, I'm in my early 30s, and about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I just took up an interest in learning more about Alpina's history. And I grew up here, spent all my years here, and there's so much that I didn't know. And the more I learn, the more I realize how amazing our community is. So we started because a couple of people trekked up to the area through swamps and forests and found just a wealth of timber to be harvested. And the nation was still young at the time. This was the 1850s. So we were growing as a nation. The western states weren't even developed yet. And people saw opportunity here, an opportunity to make a lot of money harvesting timber. So they came up, bought up land, negotiated with Native Americans, and took over much of the land to harvest the timber. In order to do this, they needed help. So they needed to recruit lots of young, strong men to come and work in logging camps, and that was really how Alpina started out. We had a lot of laborers and tough men who were willing to work for not very much money. We're talking a few dollars a month to go out and work together to cut down trees. They would take them from these outlying areas, haul them into the river banks with horses or sometimes even packs of dogs. And then when the snow melted, they would float them down the river all the way into the bay.
Now, what was a logging camp like?
Probably not a place that you or I would want to hang out. I'm sure it didn't smell great. It was a place where people basically they rested their head at night. These men got up as soon as the sun was up, first light. There wasn't electricity back then, so they relied on the earth, and they worked 12 and 14-hour days until the sun went down at night. Often 7 days a week. They didn't get overtime pay, vacation pay. It was just their job, and that's what they did. Women didn't live at camp, but sometimes the logging men did have families, and the women lived in town. And there are pictures that you see of, if you look through any books of Alpina's history, you'll see logging camp pictures with pictures of women and babies. And logging camps were in a place where women and children wanted to hang out for very long, but they would come out and visit once in a while.
Now, a lot of the loggers, were they from the area, or did they travel to Alpina to log?
They came from all over. In the early days, they came from other places. I have a great grandfather who came over from Europe actually, and he did the same thing over there. And so some people immigrated into the country for that purpose, and it was a better way of life than what they had in their previous home.
And how long would you say the logging industry was booming here?
It was booming for quite a while. It kind of peaked in around late 1880s. And for an example, towards that time when we had gotten more sophisticated with the production of logging and the procedure of getting them from the forest to the boats in the harbor, I think the best year Alpina produced over 219 million board feet of lumber.
Oh, wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's just raw lumber. And then from this, they also made things. They made lath, which if you've ever seen an old house or even in a movie where they have strips of wood on the studs on the wall and then plaster all over them, that's how they used to build homes. Now we just put sheetrock or drywall up. They also made shingles, cedar shakes, shingles, and things like broom handles, telephone poles, fence posts, pretty much anything made out of wood. Sawmills in the area were just as much of a common sight as logging camps.
And do you think that they decided here would be such a great area to log in because of the bay and because of the lake?
Yes. It was estimated that on a good year, Alpina would see 1,500 to 2,000 ships coming in and out of the harbor.
Well,
so if you can imagine, In the early days, the railroad wasn't built at the time yet, so shipping was really the main method of transportation. And we're
like a freeway for ships.
right, and we have a prime location on the bay and a great river. One thing that logging camps used to do, the men used to brand the logs, just much like you see cattle being branded out west. And that was when they floated them in the river and got them down. Some of them would get mixed up with all these other people that were running logging camps. So everyone had their own unique brand to their company, and it was on like a big mallet, and they smashed it into the end of the log so that as they're sorting them, they can tell whose goes to who.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the history lesson, Mary Beth.
You're welcome.
And continue to join us on Tuesdays when Mary Beth will continue to aspire Alpina.